My husband called me while I was visiting friends. I'm divorcing you, and I've sold our business to start over with your sister. He laughed. I replied calmly, good for you. When I got home, his cocky smile vanished when he saw. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. You know those perfect, golden afternoons in early fall? The kind that feel like a soft, warm blanket. The sun isn't scorching like it is in August, it just seems to kiss your skin. There's a gentle breeze that rustles the yellowing leaves, and the world just seems to be humming along peacefully, content in its own rhythm. I was having one of those. I was sitting on the tiny wrought iron balcony of a little cafe I loved downtown, the kind with wobbly tables and ivy climbing the brick walls. It was my secret spot, a place I'd go to think. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans and the faint, sweet scent of pastries from the bakery next door. I was sipping an espresso, the bitter warmth spreading through me, just watching the world go by on the street below, people walking with purpose, laughing, living their lives. It was an afternoon like any other, completely and beautifully ordinary, until my phone buzzed on the table, a harsh, electronic sound that cut through the peace. The screen lit up with a name I knew as well as my own, Walter. My husband. I stared at it for a couple of seconds, my thumb hovering over the answer button. A strange, cold feeling, like a drop of ice water, started to trickle down my spine. It was that little voice in the back of your head, the one you try so hard to ignore, the one that whispers a warning that something is wrong. I took a breath, pushed the feeling down, and pressed the green button, bringing the phone to my ear. Hello? Evelyn, his voice came through the line, and the cold feeling intensified. There was something off about the way he said my name. It was too formal, too crisp. It wasn't the voice of the man who shared my bed, my life. It was the voice of a businessman about to deliver bad news to a subordinate. I'm calling to tell you something, he said, and the line went quiet. He was waiting. He was making me wait. I didn't speak. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of asking, what is it? I just waited, my hand tightening around my now lukewarm coffee cup. I could feel my own heartbeat, a slow, heavy thud in my chest. Finally, he spoke again. I want a divorce. The words were blunt, like stones thrown against a window pane. There was no hesitation, no hint of regret, no softness. They were just a cold, hard statement of fact. I let them hang in the air between us, echoing in the silence over the phone. I felt like I was supposed to be feeling something overwhelming, a tidal wave of shock, a searing pain, a rush of anger, but instead, there was just a profound, hollow numbness. It felt as if my heart had been suddenly and expertly packed in ice. He didn't wait for me to process it, to respond. He just steamrolled ahead. I've sold the company, he continued, and his tone shifted, the coldness replaced by something else, a smug, oily confidence. It was the voice he used when he closed a big deal, the voice of a man who believed he had just won everything. Brenda and I are leaving. We're starting over. Brenda. That name. That name hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs in a way the word divorce hadn't. Of course, the name wasn't unfamiliar. It was the name of my stepsister. The girl my father had welcomed into our home with open arms when he married her mother years ago. The girl I had tried to mentor, to guide, to treat like my own blood. The woman Walter thought I knew nothing about. The affair he assumed I was too blind, too simple, too wrapped up in my own little world to ever see. I set my coffee cup down on the saucer with a soft, deliberate click. My hand was perfectly steady. I looked out at the city again. The afternoon sun was dipping lower now, casting long, dramatic shadows across the pavement. I wondered what he was expecting from me. A scream? A flood of messy tears? A string of furious, impotent curses? He was probably waiting for it, picturing me collapsing in on myself, enjoying the thought of my breakdown from afar. I took a slow, deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool autumn air. Then I spoke, my voice so calm and even it surprised even me. Congratulations. On the other end of the line, there was a beat of pure, unadulterated shock. I heard his breath catch in his throat. He was genuinely thrown off balance. Congratulations, he repeated, his voice laced with disbelief. He couldn't possibly have heard me right. I almost smiled. A cold, sharp little smile. If that's what you want, Walter, I said, keeping my voice light, almost cheerful, then good for you. And then he laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was triumphant, arrogant, and deeply condescending. The laugh of a bully on a playground who has just pushed a smaller child to the ground. I didn't think you'd take it this easily, he sneered, his confidence returning. You do realize, Evelyn, you have absolutely nothing left, don't you? The company is sold. I own the majority of the assets. The inheritance your father left you, the seed money that started it all? It's all tied up in company assets, my assets now. I glanced at my watch. The timing had to be perfect. Is that what you think? I asked, my voice still perfectly even. Of course, he nearly shouted with glee. It's all done. My lawyers have taken care of everything. They're the best. I hope you won't make this difficult, try to fight for a bigger divorce settlement or something. Don't try to fight for something that's already lost. You know the law isn't on your side here. Oh, really? I tilted my head, even though he couldn't see me, a gesture of mock curiosity. My voice was as light as air. Then maybe you should check again, Walter. I hung up the phone before he could say another word, ending the call on my terms. In that moment, sitting there on that balcony, an incredible, powerful sense of relief washed over me. It was as if a heavy chain I didn't even realize I had been dragging for years had just been shattered into 1,000 pieces. Walter thought he was the one in control. He thought he was the one calling the shots, ending the game on his terms. He had no idea that this whole time, I was the one dealing the cards from a completely different deck. The game wasn't over. It was just getting started. For a long moment after the call ended, I just sat there, the phone resting silently on the table. The espresso in my cup was stone cold, but I didn't notice. The sounds of the city, the honk of a distant taxi, the cheerful chatter of a couple walking by, it all seemed to fade into a distant, muffled hum. My mind, however, was a place of absolute, razor-sharp clarity. It was focused in a way it hadn't been for years. Walter thought I was a fool. A naive, trusting wife. Both of them did. Brenda, my own stepsister, had played her part perfectly. I started to connect the dots, replaying a reel of little moments from the past year, moments that had felt like tiny splinters under my skin at the time, but now formed a clear, ugly picture. I remembered the family dinner for my father's 70th birthday, about 6 months ago. It was a loud, happy affair at his favorite Italian restaurant. I had gotten up to help clear some plates, and when I came back, I saw them. Walter and Brenda. They were standing near the bar, heads close together, supposedly discussing a new show they were both watching. But then, I saw Walter's hand go to the small of her back, his fingers gently tracing a small circle. It was a fleeting gesture, possessive and intimate, over in a second. But I saw it. Later that night, in the car on the way home, I had mentioned it. You seem pretty friendly with Brenda tonight, I'd said, trying to keep my voice casual. He had laughed, a short, dismissive sound. She's your sister, Evelyn. For God's sake. She was telling me about some trouble she's having at work. Don't be ridiculous. He had that way about him, that talent for making me feel like I was the one who was crazy, paranoid, seeing ghosts where there were none. And for a while, I almost believed him. Almost. But that little seed of doubt had been planted. And I had been watering it carefully ever since. I wasn't the fragile, clueless wife he pictured me as. While he was sneaking around, thinking he was so clever with his whispered phone calls and deleted text messages, I was doing my own work. Quietly. Methodically. After that dinner, I had called my lawyer, Arthur. Not just any lawyer, but the best corporate litigator in the state. Arthur, I had said, I need you to do a quiet audit of all of Walter's executive accounts. And I want to start the process of exercising my options to acquire outstanding investor shares. My phone buzzed again, pulling me from my reverie. It wasn't Walter this time. It was Arthur. I answered immediately. Arthur, it's me. Evelyn, his voice was calm and reassuring, a welcome contrast to Walter's arrogance. I heard a tremor on the market wire. A potential sale of Harrison Capital. I take it he made his move? He just did, I said, my voice steady. And our preparations? He asked. Everything is in place, I confirmed. The final share transfer documents were signed and filed yesterday afternoon. There was a pause on the line, and I could hear the faint smile in his voice when he spoke again. Excellent. Well, in that case, he can't sell what he no longer owns. A slow, genuine smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a smile of grim, righteous satisfaction. The kind of smile you get when you know a long-awaited justice is about to be served, cold and precise. Walter had just declared war, not knowing I had already won it weeks ago. He thought he was playing checkers, while I had been meticulously setting up a chessboard. And he had just walked his king directly into my trap. I picked up my purse, left a generous tip on the table, and walked away from the cafe, my posture straight, my steps confident. The city looked strangely beautiful this evening. The game was on. The drive home felt surreal. The familiar streets of our quiet, tree-lined suburb, a place I had once found so comforting, now seemed like a set for a movie I was no longer a part of. Every turn, every landmark, held a memory that was now tainted. There was the corner market where Walter and I used to stop on Sunday mornings. He'd grab the Wall Street Journal while I picked out a bouquet of fresh flowers, usually lilies, my favorite. I wondered if he even remembered that. There was the park where we'd walked our golden retriever, Buddy, every single evening, rain or shine, before he passed away 2 years ago. I remember one evening, in this very car, we had a huge argument about business strategy. He wanted to take on massive debt for a risky expansion. I advocated for slower, more stable growth. He had condescendingly called me too cautious. Looking back, I realized that was the beginning of him seeing me not as a partner, but as an obstacle. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I was filled with a cold, hard purpose. The radio was playing some forgettable pop song, all about love and heartbreak. I switched it off, preferring the silence. The pain of the betrayal was still there, a dull, heavy ache deep in my chest, but it was overshadowed by something else now, a steely resolve. My mind was on the business. Our business. The tech company we had started from nothing in the cramped, dusty garage of our first little house. I remembered the long nights, fueled by cheap pizza and lukewarm coffee, the two of us huddled over a single computer, writing the code that would become our future. I remembered the sheer, heart-pounding thrill of landing our first major client, the way we had celebrated with a single bottle of expensive champagne we couldn't really afford, drinking it straight from the bottle because we didn't even own proper glasses. It was our baby. We had built it from our sweat and our dreams. But success, I had learned, doesn't just build things up, it can also corrode them. The more money Walter made, the more distant he became. The passionate partner I had built an empire with was slowly replaced by a stranger in an expensive suit, a man who saw the company not as our shared dream, but as his personal bank account and ego machine. He had forgotten that I wasn't just the wife. I was the architect of our flagship software. I was the one who designed the security protocols that made our clients trust us with their most sensitive data. He had forgotten who I was. And that was going to be his biggest, most catastrophic mistake. I had to stop for gas on the way home. The simple, mundane act felt absurd. Here I was, my entire life imploding, and I still had to pump gas. The attendant, a young kid, gave me a friendly nod. "Have a good one, ma'am." For a second, I wanted to laugh. Finally, I pulled into the long, stone-paved driveway of the mansion Walter had insisted on buying. The house looked cold and imposing under the fading light of the setting sun. It had never felt like a home. It was a showcase, a statement. Tonight, it was a stage. And the final act of this sham of a marriage was about to begin. I parked the car, turned off the engine, and sat there for a full minute in the sudden silence, gathering my strength. Then, I took one last deep breath, and got out. It was time to bring down the curtain. The heavy, ornate wooden front doors opened with a soft, expensive click. The sound of my heels on the cavernous marble entryway was unnaturally loud, each click echoing off the high ceilings, announcing my arrival like a drumbeat. The house was silent, except for the low, smug murmur of some jazz music coming from the grand living room. And there he was. Exactly where I knew he would be, a perfect cliché of a man celebrating his own genius. Walter was lounging in his favorite custom-made leather armchair, the one he arrogantly called his throne, swirling a glass of what looked like a very expensive red wine. And standing beside him, her hand resting possessively on his shoulder as if she were a prize he had just won, was Brenda. My stepsister was wearing a tight, blood-red dress, a color she never wore, but one that was clearly chosen for the occasion. It was a dress meant to signify victory. The moment Walter saw me, his lips curled into that condescending, self-satisfied smile I had come to despise. "Evelyn. You're finally home," he said, his voice a disgusting blend of false sympathy and gloating satisfaction. He made a show of looking at his watch. Traffic must have been terrible. Brenda and I were just about to open another bottle to celebrate our new venture. Brenda just stood there, a smug little smirk playing on her lips. She looked me up and down, her eyes filled with a kind of pity that was more insulting than any curse. It was the look of someone who believes they have taken everything from you. I didn't rise to the bait. I walked slowly and deliberately across the room, placed my handbag on the polished mahogany table, and sat down in the cream-colored armchair directly across from him. Our neutral ground. I met his gaze and held it, letting the silence stretch. "Yes, Walter," I said finally, my voice calm and clear. "And it's fascinating that you think you have anything to celebrate." Reaching into my briefcase, the one he always teased me for carrying, calling it my security blanket, I pulled out a thick, heavy stack of documents. It was at least 3 inches thick, bound neatly with a heavy-duty clip. I placed it on the coffee table between us, not gently, but with a decisive, solid thud. The sound seemed to shatter the smug atmosphere in the room. Walter's eyes narrowed, his gaze flicking from my face down to the stack of papers. The condescending smile faltered. Brenda shifted uneasily, her hand dropping from his shoulder. "What is this?" Walter asked, his voice losing its smooth edge, now strained and suspicious. "Some kind of divorce petition from a second-rate lawyer?" "Don't bother, Evelyn. Mine are better." I laced my fingers together in my lap and offered him a serene, almost beatific smile. "The truth," I said simply. "And I think you should read it before you continue with your little victory speech." He hesitated for a second, then snatched the documents from the table with a theatrical sigh, as if I were a child presenting a poorly written essay. He started flipping through the first few pages, his expression bored and dismissive. But then, his flipping slowed. He stopped on one page. His eyes scanned it, then scanned it again. I watched as the color began to drain from his face, replaced by a pale, sickly shade of gray. His eyes widened in disbelief, his mouth hanging slightly open. What the hell is this?" he stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper. I picked up a single sheet from the top of the stack, the one I knew would cut him the deepest. "According to the shareholder agreement we both signed 15 years ago," I began, reading the clause aloud in a clear, lecture-like voice, "no sale or transfer of company shares can occur without the written, notarized approval of all primary stakeholders." Ring any bells, Walter? I let the words sink in before I continued. And as you can see from these documents, I slid another paper toward him, a series of signed agreements and notarized transfer receipts. I spent the last 3 months quietly acquiring the outstanding shares from our other investors. You used to own 55%, Walter. But while you were busy with your personal affairs, I glanced pointedly at Brenda, whose face had gone ashen. I was busy working. I now control over 65% of the company. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. Brenda looked at Walter, then back at me, pure, unadulterated panic spreading across her face. No, she whispered, shaking her head. No, this can't be. Walter, you told me you had control. You told me everything was a done deal. Walter just stared at the papers, his hands trembling so hard the documents rattled. The cocky, triumphant smile was gone. In its place was the terrified, bewildered face of a man who had just realized the ground beneath his feet had completely and irrevocably disappeared. Walter looked up from the papers, his eyes wide and wild with a desperate mix of fury and disbelief. This is impossible, he muttered, shaking his head as if to clear it. A trick. You can't, you don't have that kind of liquid capital. Where would you get the money? I let out a soft, humorless chuckle that seemed to echo in the tense silence of the room. Oh, Walter. You always were so dismissive of anything that was just mine. You seem to forget about the inheritance from my grandmother, the trust fund she set up for me. You always called it my little hobby money, didn't you? Something for me to play with. Turns out, it was more than enough to buy back our dream from the man who was trying to sell it out from under me. I leaned back in my armchair, crossing my legs, the picture of calm. I was enjoying the sight of his world slowly, painfully, crumbling around him. Brenda, finally finding her voice again, turned on him with the fury of a woman scorned. Walter? What is she talking about? An inheritance? You told me she had nothing. You told me her money was all tied up. You told me we were rich. Her voice was shrill, ugly. Looks like he told you exactly what you wanted to hear, Brenda, I interjected coolly. But I wasn't done. Oh no. This was just the appetizer. It was time for the main course. I reached back into my briefcase and pulled out a second, even thicker, stack of documents, placing them on the table right next to the first one with another satisfying thud. But this, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone that made them both flinch, is where things get really interesting. Walter stared at the new stack of papers as if it were a venomous snake poised to strike. He didn't dare touch it. Do you remember the $1.2 million that mysteriously disappeared from the company's internal investment fund over the last 2 years, Walter? I asked, keeping my gaze locked on his. The funds you explained away as market volatility? And what about those very lucrative contracts you signed with a shell consulting firm based in Hong Kong? A firm that, after a little digging, I discovered is registered to your old college roommate and doesn't actually exist? He froze completely. His face, which was already pale, turned a ghastly shade of white. Even Brenda, who knew nothing about the intricacies of corporate finance, could tell from the sheer terror on his face that this was bad. Very, very bad. I leaned forward, my voice now a razor-sharp whisper that cut through the air. That's called financial fraud, Walter. And embezzlement. And wire fraud. They're federal offenses. I have records of every single suspicious transaction you've made for the past 3 years. Bank statements, internal emails you thought you deleted, offshore account numbers in the Cayman Islands. There's enough evidence here, I tapped the thick stack of papers, to trigger a full-scale federal investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Internal Revenue Service. I let that sink in for a moment, watching the sweat bead on his forehead, before delivering the final, devastating blow. And guess what? I already sent a complete, digitized, and encrypted copy to my lawyer this morning. He's a very good lawyer, Walter. The best, in fact. And he's just waiting for my signal to forward it all to the authorities. Walter shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. He slammed his fist on the coffee table, making the wine glasses jump and spill red wine like blood on the polished wood. "You dare," he roared, his face contorted in a mask of impotent rage. I stood up as well, my 5'7" frame suddenly feeling 10 feet tall. I met his fury with an unblinking, icy calm. "Dare to do what, Walter? Let you and my fame-chasing stepsister run off with millions of dollars you stole? Let you destroy the company I poured my heart and soul, my own inheritance, into? Did you really think I was that naive? That I would just roll over and cry while you burned my entire life to the ground?" The room was silent again, the only sound was Walter's heavy, ragged breathing. He looked trapped. A cornered animal. He had nowhere to run, and he was finally, painfully, starting to realize it. The air in the room was thick and heavy, crackling with unspoken threats. Walter stood there, trembling with a rage that had nowhere to go. It was a powerless, pathetic rage. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, no words, no clever retorts, no bluffs coming out. All the arrogance, all the condescending charm, had been stripped away, leaving behind a frightened, cornered man in an expensive suit. It was Brenda who broke the silence. She took a hesitant step back from Walter, then another, as if his toxicity were a physical aura she was trying to escape. You lied to me," she stammered, her voice a reedy, trembling whisper. The panic in her eyes was raw and real now. This was not part of the fantasy she had so carefully constructed in her head, the one where she rode off into the sunset with a rich, powerful man, her life of luxury assured. I crossed my arms, watching the predictable scene unfold with a detached sense of satisfaction. Their sordid little alliance was built on a foundation of greed and lies, and now, under the slightest bit of pressure, it was crumbling into dust. Walter turned to her, his expression desperate, pleading. He was searching for an ally, for someone, anyone, to back him up in this nightmare. "Brenda, honey, listen to me," he started, his voice a pathetic attempt at soothing. "She's just trying to scare us. It's a bluff. We can fight this. My lawyers." But Brenda was done listening. The dream was over, and a cold, terrifying reality was setting in. "Fight this?" she shrieked, her voice rising with hysteria. "Walter, she's talking about the FBI. The IRS. She's talking about federal prison. I don't want to be involved in this. You promised me everything would be fine. You promised me there were no risks. You said her precious inheritance was all tied up and we were safe." "It is fine," he insisted, but his voice lacked any conviction. It was the weak reassurance of a man who was trying to convince himself as much as her. "No, it's not," she cried, ugly tears of fear and frustration now streaming down her face, carving black tracks of mascara through her carefully applied makeup. "I'm not going to jail for you. You think I'm going to trade my life for yours?" She let out a laugh that was half a sob. "I should have known better." Without another word, she turned, frantically looking around for her ridiculously expensive purse. She spotted it on the floor, snatched it up, and bolted for the front door, her high heels clattering awkwardly on the hardwood. She didn't even look back. "Brenda, wait!" Walter called after her, taking a step as if to follow. "Don't leave me!" But it was too late. The heavy front door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the house like a gunshot, a final, definitive end to their partnership. It left behind an eerie, profound silence. He was alone. Completely and utterly alone. His partner in crime, the woman he was willing to throw his marriage and his company away for, had abandoned him at the very first sign of real trouble. I looked at him. He was standing in the middle of the room, looking lost and defeated, his shoulders slumped. There was no pity in my heart for him. None at all. He had sown the wind, and now he was reaping the whirlwind. I calmly picked up my briefcase and my handbag from the table. Tomorrow, I said, my voice crisp and businesslike, the board will hold an emergency meeting. But you won't need to attend. Because as of this moment, you are officially terminated from the company for cause, pending criminal investigation. Your network access, your keycard, your corporate accounts, they have all been revoked. I turned and walked toward the door. Just before I stepped out into the cool night air, I paused and glanced back at him one last time. He was just standing there, a statue of a broken man. You know, Walter, I said softly, my voice barely a whisper, if you had just been a man and asked for a clean divorce, I might have let you walk away with something. I might have even wished you well, for the sake of the years we once shared. But you chose betrayal. You chose to try and destroy me. And for that, you get absolutely nothing. I opened the door, stepped out, and closed it gently behind me. The game was over. An hour later, I was miles away from that cold, empty house. I was in a place Walter didn't even know existed, a place that was truly mine. It was a small, discreet office on the 25th floor of a downtown skyscraper, rented under my maiden name. This was my real headquarters, my sanctuary, my command center. The only light came from the cool blue glow of my 3 large computer monitors, which cast long shadows across the room, illuminating lines of code, complex financial charts, and rows of encrypted file directories. Walter might have thought I was just a simple wife who got lucky in the tech boom he created. He'd forgotten, or perhaps conveniently chosen to ignore, a critical detail about the woman he married. Before we co-founded Harrison Capital, I had spent 6 years as a senior cybersecurity analyst for one of the largest financial corporations in the world. My specialty was digital forensics and the detection of sophisticated financial fraud. I didn't just understand technology, I understood how criminals used it. I knew exactly how systems worked, how data could be manipulated, and more importantly, how to find the digital breadcrumbs that crooks, no matter how clever they think they are, always leave behind. For over a year, ever since that dinner party where I saw his hand on Brenda's back, I had been working in the shadows. It started as a gut feeling, a need to protect myself and the company I had helped build. Using my unrestricted administrative privileges Walter had forgotten I still possessed, I installed what appeared to be a routine security and performance audit software across our entire network. In reality, it was my own sophisticated, undetectable surveillance system. It wasn't illegal. As a majority shareholder and the original architect of our system, I had every right to monitor the security and integrity of our network. Walter, in his supreme arrogance, never even thought to check. He was too busy covering his surface tracks to realize I was watching his every move from the inside. I opened a heavily encrypted file on my main screen, typing in a long, complex password that was a combination of my mother's birthday and the hexadecimal code for our first successful software build. The system came to life, and all of Walter's dirty secrets were laid bare, organized in neat, undeniable columns and charts. First, the suspicious transactions. I had flagged over $3.8 million that had been siphoned from the company's internal investment fund. He was clever, doing it in small, irregular amounts, but my algorithm had spotted the pattern. The money was funneled through a dizzying series of shell corporations before ending up in anonymous offshore accounts. I had traced them all, to the Cayman Islands, to Switzerland, to a small, private bank in Singapore. I had the account numbers. I had the transfer logs. Second, the phantom contracts. I had a file filled with hundreds of thousands of dollars paid out for consulting services to companies that were nothing more than a P.O. box and a cheap website. A little more digging revealed these companies were registered to a couple of Walter's old college fraternity brothers. And then, what my lawyer Arthur called the smoking gun. I clicked on a file labeled audio_WH_office_MAR12. An audio recording began to play. I had extracted it from the security system's ambient data logs, a feature I built in myself. It was a conversation Walter had in his office on his speakerphone, thinking he was completely alone. His voice was crystal clear and unmistakably arrogant. "We'll keep pulling money from the company in small amounts," his voice said, speaking to one of his cronies. "No one will notice. Once the sale goes through and the books are transferred, we'll have enough to leave, and no one will ever be able to trace it back to us. I hit the pause button. The evidence was absolute. It was irrefutable. I wasn't just going to win a divorce settlement. I was going to dismantle his entire illicit life, using the very technology he thought he commanded. He had forgotten that I was the one who built the castle. And I was the only one who knew where all the secret passages and hidden trapdoors were. I switched from my evidence files to the real-time financial transaction interface of our company. It was a complex, beautiful system I had designed myself years ago, a web of checks and balances that Walter had never bothered to fully understand. Just as I expected, a frantic flurry of activity was coming from Walter's executive account credentials. Red flags and security alerts were popping up all over my screen like a digital rash. He was making one last, desperate, panicked attempt to move whatever remaining funds he could get his hands on overseas. He was trying to liquidate his stock options, transfer his 7-figure bonus pay, empty every account he had access to. A small, cold smirk touched my lips. Not so fast, Walter. Did you really think I'd leave that door open for you? With a series of precise, rapid keystrokes, my fingers flying across the ergonomic keyboard, I activated the security override protocol I had built into the system for just such an emergency. It was a digital kill switch, a final firewall that not even he could bypass. I typed in the final command, execute_lockdown_Harrison, and hit enter. Across the city, in whatever 5-star hotel he was hiding in, Walter was probably staring at his laptop screen in utter horror and confusion. One by one, stark, red alert messages would be popping up, ending his escape plan. Transaction failed, security protocol engaged. Account temporarily locked pending administrative review. Access denied. He would click again, frantically. Blocked. He tried to log in through a back-end portal he thought only he knew about. Connection severed. He tried to access the offshore accounts. Locked. Every digital door he tried to open was slammed shut and bolted in his face. The entire process was over in less than 30 seconds. His financial world had just been hermetically sealed. At that exact moment, my desk phone buzzed. It was the secure line I had set up with my lawyer, Arthur. I put him on speaker. "It's happening, Evelyn." Arthur's voice was electric with excitement. "My contact at the SEC just confirmed they've received the files. They're filing the emergency asset freeze motion with a federal judge as we speak. The IRS is doing the same on their end. Walter Harrison won't be able to withdraw a single penny anywhere in the world." "Good," I said, watching my screen as a final alert confirmed Walter's network credentials had been permanently purged from the system. "I want them to scrutinize every single transaction, every contract he's signed in the past 5 years. Leave no stone unturned." "Don't you worry," Arthur assured me. "With what you've given them, they won't let him off the hook. He's in very, very deep." I ended the call and opened up one last program on my screen, a secure messaging app connected to a former colleague of mine, a good man who is now a high-ranking agent at the FBI's cybercrime division. I'd sent him a professional courtesy heads-up earlier in the day, just in case things escalated. A new message from him was waiting. "Agent Peterson, the files you sent are more than enough to open a federal investigation. This isn't just about civil penalties anymore, Evelyn. He could be looking at serious prison time for wire fraud and conspiracy." I typed back a short, simple reply, "Good. I want him to pay for everything." With one final, satisfying command, I packaged every single piece of evidence, the transaction logs, the offshore account details, the incriminating audio recording, into a single, heavily encrypted file. I sent it simultaneously to the investigating agencies, the SEC, the IRS, and directly to Agent Peterson at the FBI. The digital checkmate was complete. If you're still listening, if you've followed me on this journey so far, please help me out by liking this video and commenting with the number 1 down below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me you're right here with me through all of this. Your support is a huge encouragement for me to keep going. Just comment with the number 1 and then listen to what happened next. The fallout was faster, louder, and more spectacular than even I could have imagined. It wasn't a slow leak, it was a dam breaking, releasing a tidal wave of scandal that swept through the financial world. Within 48 hours, the name Walter Harrison was everywhere. But this time, it wasn't in the glossy pages of business magazines next to a fawning article about his latest success. It was in ugly, stark headlines on every major news network. Tech CEO Walter Harrison under federal investigation for massive fraud and embezzlement. Harrison Capital assets frozen worldwide amidst corporate scandal. I watched it unfold from the quiet sanctuary of my office, a cup of chamomile tea in my hand. The company's stock, Harrison Capital, went into freefall. It was a bloodbath. The stock lost nearly 40% of its value in a single day as terrified investors panicked and scrambled to pull their money out. The business partners who had been slapping him on the back and laughing at his terrible jokes just a week ago were now desperately trying to distance themselves, issuing public statements full of carefully crafted shock and appall. Across the city, Walter was living a waking nightmare. I pieced together the details later from various sources. He had checked into a ridiculously expensive suite at the Four Seasons after leaving the house, but his gilded cage was rapidly becoming a prison. I could almost picture him, pacing the plush carpet like a caged animal, his designer suit rumpled, his face pale with a mixture of exhaustion and pure terror. His hands would have been trembling as he frantically dialed number after number on his phone. He called his personal attorney, the best in the city for corporate law. The call went straight to voicemail. He called his financial advisor, the man who had managed his portfolio for a decade. A curt email came back a few minutes later. Given the circumstances, I can no longer represent you. He called his so-called friends, the ones he played golf with at the country club. Their numbers suddenly went straight to voicemail, or their assistants would politely inform him that Mr. So-and-so was in a meeting. The pressure must have been suffocating. He tried to check out of the hotel, planning to flee the country, only to have his corporate black card declined. Then his personal one. He would have opened his banking app on his phone, his heart pounding, only to see the same horrifying, sterile message over and over again: account frozen by federal order. Even the secret offshore account he thought was his ultimate escape plan was locked tight. He was trapped. Trapped in a city that had once been his kingdom, and was now his prison. He was a king with no castle, no army, and not a single dollar to his name. He was just a man, a pathetic man, running from the consequences of his own bottomless greed. And there was absolutely nowhere left for him to run. A week after Walter's world imploded, I stepped into the grand ballroom of the Grand Manhattan Hotel. The annual Financial Technology Summit was in full swing, the cavernous room buzzing with the low, powerful hum of the industry's biggest players making deals and trading gossip. And the biggest gossip of the year, of course, was me. All eyes turned toward me as I walked down the long, carpeted aisle toward the main stage. The whispers followed me like a wave, a mixture of curiosity, pity, and admiration. But I wasn't Mrs. Harrison anymore, the quiet, supportive wife who stood smiling in the background at events like these, a mere accessory to her husband's success. Today, I was Evelyn Hayes, my maiden name, my real name. And I was here to tear down the last remaining pillar of Walter's crumbling legacy, his reputation. I stepped up to the podium, the bright stage lights warm on my face. Behind me, a massive LED screen, which had been displaying the summit's logo, flickered and changed. It now showed a simple, stark title slide I had prepared: the truth about Harrison Capital, integrity, deception, and the path forward. The crowd fell into a hush. "Good morning," I began, my voice strong and unwavering, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system. It filled every corner of the vast room. "I'm sure you've all seen the headlines. I'm sure you've all heard the rumors. And today, I am here to tell you that what we are witnessing is not just the downfall of one man. It is a costly, painful, but necessary lesson in the currencies that truly matter in our industry: trust and integrity." I paused, letting my words sink in, making eye contact with the powerful faces in the front rows. Harrison Capital was once a powerhouse, I continued, my voice ringing with conviction. But its value, as we now know, was a house of cards, built on a foundation of lies. Walter Harrison didn't just deceive me, his partner in business and in life. He deceived his investors. He deceived his partners. He deceived every single person in this room who ever did business with him. Behind me, the screen changed. It began to display a curated series of internal emails, falsified financial reports, and the shady transaction logs I had compiled. The evidence was irrefutable. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the highly educated audience. People started pulling out their phones and tablets, no doubt seeing their own company names implicated in some of the fraudulent deals. My gaze scanned the front row and landed on Charles Whitmore, a powerful and deeply respected investor, a man of the old school who had once privately voiced his concerns to me about Walter's aggressive and opaque accounting practices. "Mr. Whitmore," I said, my voice cutting through the rising noise. "I believe my office sent you the full, unedited financial report this morning. Can you confirm, for the record, what I've just stated?" Charles, a distinguished man with silver hair, stood up, straightened his tie, and walked to a nearby microphone. He cleared his throat. "I have reviewed the data," he said, his voice booming with authority. "And everything Ms. Hayes has said is, unfortunately and disgracefully, entirely accurate. My firm is withdrawing all capital from any entity associated with Mr. Harrison, effective immediately." That was the nail in the coffin. It was an open declaration of war. One by one, other executives from major firms stood up and publicly severed all ties with Harrison Capital. In the space of 15 minutes, Walter Harrison became a pariah. As his name was being dragged through the mud, my phone, resting on the podium, buzzed with a message from my own finance team. I discreetly glanced at the screen. The small, private cybersecurity firm I had been building on the side for the past 2 years, Hayes Secure Solutions, had just seen its stock valuation surge by nearly 30% in a single morning. Investors, fleeing from the wreckage of Walter's lies, were looking for a safe harbor. They were looking for a company built on integrity and real, demonstrable value. They were looking for me. The boardroom of Harrison Capital felt like a mausoleum. The air was thick with the stench of failure and fear. The remaining shareholders and board members, those who weren't already facing legal inquiries themselves, sat around the long, polished mahogany table, their faces a mask of anxiety and grim curiosity. They were all waiting for me, the woman they had once dismissed as Walter's wife. I walked in, my heels clicking powerfully and deliberately against the marble floor. The sound was the only thing breaking the heavy, suffocating silence. I didn't greet anyone. I didn't smile. I just walked to the head of the table, to the large, ostentatious leather chair that Walter had once treated like his personal throne, and I sat down. Behind me, the large projector screen at the end of the room lit up at my command. "We have a lot to address today," I said, my voice calm, controlled, and razor-sharp. It cut through the tension like a surgeon's scalpel. So I will get straight to the point. As you are all painfully aware, Walter Harrison deceived every single one of us. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their expensive chairs. Others just stared at the table. "I have in my possession," I continued, emphasizing each word, "every piece of evidence documenting his illegal activities. He attempted to sell this company without the board's consent, using fraudulent numbers to wildly inflate its value for his own personal gain. What he didn't realize was that I, as a co-founder and concerned stakeholder, had already taken legal steps to secure my position and protect the company's true assets. I now hold controlling interest." A wave of shocked whispers spread through the room. I looked directly at a few of the board members who I knew had been Walter's golfing buddies, his yes-men, the ones who had enabled his behavior, and looked the other way in exchange for a piece of the pie. I tapped a command on my tablet, and the screen behind me changed. A list of 5 names appeared under a stark, simple heading, "For immediate removal." "The individuals on this list," I announced, my voice devoid of emotion, "either actively participated in Walter's scheme or were grossly negligent and complicit through their silence and willful ignorance. As of this moment, their roles in this company, along with all associated benefits and stock options, are terminated, for cause. A few sputtering murmurs of protest arose, but they died just as quickly. They knew they had no ground to stand on. I had absolute control, legally and morally. This wasn't a discussion, it was a cleansing. Then, I turned my attention to the loyal, competent investors and board members, the ones who had been pushed aside and ignored by Walter. I have a plan, I told them, my tone shifting from steel to stone, to restructure this company. Not just to repair the catastrophic damage Walter has left behind, but to lead us into a stronger, more transparent, and far more profitable future. I pressed another button, and the screen shifted again. A new logo appeared. It was a sleek, modern, and powerful design, a mythical phoenix, rendered in silver and blue, rising from a circle of golden flames. Below it were the words, Phoenix Innovation Group. Harrison Capital died with Walter's betrayal, I declared, my voice now filled with a passion and conviction that commanded the room. Its name is poison. But from its ashes, we will build something stronger, something better. Phoenix Innovation Group will divest from the speculative ventures Walter chased and focus on what this company should have focused on all along, cutting-edge technology and cybersecurity. A sector I know better than anyone. The room was silent, stunned by the audacity and clarity of my vision. Then, one by one, they started to nod. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. Phoenix Innovation Group was officially born. Walter once believed he could take everything from me, burn my world to the ground. He never imagined that I would be the one to rise from his fire, stronger and more powerful than he ever could have dreamed. Sitting in my new corner office at the Phoenix Innovation Group headquarters a few months later, I gazed out through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows. The entire Manhattan skyline stretched out before me, a breathtaking panorama of steel and light. From this height, on the 50th floor, everything below looked small and distant. The bustling yellow cabs, the streams of people, it all seemed like a different world. Just like Walter's memory was now becoming small, distant, and insignificant. My phone buzzed on the clean, uncluttered surface of my desk. It was a message from Agent Peterson at the FBI. I had been cooperating with his investigation for weeks. Walter Harrison was arrested this morning at a private airport in Miami. He was trying to board a chartered jet to South America with a fake passport and a bag full of cash. There's no way out for him now. He's facing a raft of federal charges. Thank you for your help, Evelyn. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the words settle in. A man who once commanded boardrooms and flew first class around the world was now in handcuffs, his future a bleak landscape of courtrooms and, most likely, a prison cell. It was a fitting end. Another message popped up a few minutes later. An unknown number. I should have never trusted him. I should have known he was a liar. He ruined my life. It was Brenda. I read the message, felt a brief, fleeting flicker of something that might have been pity, and then I deleted it without a second thought. She had made her choices. She wasn't worth my time or my energy anymore. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the latest quarterly financial report for Phoenix Innovation Group. The numbers on the screen glowed. Our company was soaring. Since the restructuring and rebranding, we had attracted massive investments from some of the most respected funds in the world. Major contracts for our new suite of cybersecurity products were pouring in. Our valuation had increased by a staggering 150% in just 3 short months. The media had stopped calling me Walter Harrison's ex-wife and had started calling me the Phoenix of Wall Street, the woman behind the new tech revolution. The lesson from my story, the one I hold on to, is a simple one, I think. True justice isn't just about watching a betrayer get what they deserve. It's about what you do afterwards. It's about rebuilding something stronger, smarter, and better from the ashes they leave behind. Walter thought he could manipulate everyone and everything, but he forgot one simple, unshakable truth: the truth always finds its way to the surface. In business, and in life, your integrity is the most valuable asset you have. Once it's lost, no amount of money or power can ever bring it back. I didn't just reclaim what was mine. I built an empire he could never have imagined, an empire built on honesty and innovation, not on deceit. And in doing so, I learned the greatest lesson of all: the best revenge isn't loud or angry or hateful. The best revenge is massive, undeniable, and glorious success. What do you think about my story? Do you agree that sometimes, the best way to get back at those who wronged you is to live your best life and build something they could never touch? Share your thoughts and maybe even your own stories of resilience in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this, please don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss more stories about life, family, and the lessons that truly matter. Thank you for listening.